We are in week 3 of a series called Pandora's Box. It's like a crash course in the supernatural realm. And we've been learning all kinds of powerhouse truths that change the way we interact with our world, and especially the spiritual world. So let me just run through one or two of those in case you missed it, so that you can kind of get up to speed with us. We've been learning that we are spiritual beings. This is how God has created us. Not physical beings with a spiritual component. We're spiritual beings with a physical component. In fact, we're created body, soul, and spirit, or as in this verse, it's reversed in order to show the primacy of it, spirit, soul, and body. So we are the only creatures in all of creation that are actually designed from the ground up to manifest spiritual reality. If I had a pen up here, which I was planning to bring with me, I don't have it now, but think of what a pen is designed to do. A pen is designed to write, right? So ink comes out. No, that's not what a pen is designed to do. A pen is designed to take my thoughts and somehow translate them into something physical. So in the same way that a pen is designed, a human being is designed to take God's thoughts, God's dreams, God's desires, and manifest them. Or, if we're connecting with the wrong spirit, we can manifest the attributes and atmosphere of that kingdom. So last week we talked about the fact that it's really important which spirit you partner with. If you're partnering with anything, if you partner with a sinful spirit or an evil spirit, you will manifest the attributes and the atmosphere of that kingdom. If you manifest what Jesus is offering, you will manifest what Jesus has to offer. Jesus put it this way. He called the devil, Satan, he also called him a thief. Why? Because he comes only to steal, kill, and destroy. But I've come that they may have life and life to the full. So here we go. We've got these two kingdoms active in the world. One is responsible for tearing the world apart. One is responsible for building the world up. And depending on which kingdom you partner with or say yes to or agree to, listen to, you will begin to manifest the qualities of that kingdom. We can see it all around us. Every single day we see this. We see this happening. Every single day. Now today, we're going to talk about something that our culture is obsessed with, like everything else in this series, and that is the topic of ghosts. We're going to talk about ghosts. Now, I have to say that I was shocked. This is a screenshot. Actually, it's several screenshots. I cut and paste them together. I just took the Google search bar and went, ghost television shows, click. And you know that bar of graphics that come across the top? It was like page after page. These are just the reality TV shows based on ghost stuff, like supernatural, and hauntings and exploring all that. It just went on and on and on and on. Some of these are not actually on TV anymore, but they're there, right? It's just insane how much is there. Now, I have to say that we have, as a culture, and I don't know where you sit in this room, whether you believe in ghosts, whether you don't believe in ghosts, but as a culture, we have a love-hate relationship with ghosts. On one hand, we kind of like the idea as a culture that when you die, let's say dear Uncle Frank, when dear Uncle Frank passes on, that he's not gone. We like that, depending on whether we liked Uncle Frank. That's the deciding. So if let's say we really liked Uncle Frank, and the idea that Uncle Frank is still somehow in limbo, which is sort of selfish for us, but he's in limbo, he hasn't quite moved on, and that he's sort of there watching out over us, and that we can draw some comfort and sort of backhanded connection from Uncle Frank, somehow still, that's sort of comforting to us as a culture, right? The problem is when Uncle Frank decides to stop behaving himself, right? So this is where these television shows come in. Do you understand that even our culture, if we take our culture as a barometer of what we believe about ghosts, our culture believes that 99% of the time, Uncle Frank, once he's passed on, is not going to behave himself, and that we're going to have to get specialists to come in to get rid of Uncle Frank. So as comforting as that sounds, right? This is where the idea of a poltergeist comes from, or like the haunting of this house, and how do we purge the house, and all of these things. This is what our culture needs to realize, right? So we like the idea, maybe some of us, I don't know if you're in this room, of a Long Island medium who can connect, and we can talk to Uncle Frank, and he's still there, and how would he know if it's not real? How would the Long Island medium know these intimate details of my life? It must be real. Well, the reason we've been talking so slowly and building this foundation of how the spiritual world is constructed is that we need to understand there are two classifications of spirits in the world. One of them is not ghosts. There are angelic spirits that work for God, right? And then there are evil spirits that work for the devil. So as I want to be as sensitive as I possibly can, but when it comes to ghosts, if we're not connecting with the right spirit, we're putting ourselves into a position where the manifestation of the wrong kingdom is going to be something that we have to wrestle with. We've talked about the fact that, yes, the body without the spirit, we have a body and a spirit, and that there is technically a life for the spirit after the body dies, right? Like, this is something that the Bible does affirm. We affirm the fact that because we're spiritual beings, not physical beings, when our bodies die, we don't. We have an existence. And so if we just took this verse separate by itself, it could lead us to believe that, that maybe Uncle Frank is hanging around because his body's dead, but maybe his spirit's still here. Now, the Bible doesn't speak specifically to ghosts. But what it does say are things like this. In Hebrews 9:27, it says that what happens when we die is that we face judgment. So we're destined to die once, so not reincarnation, once, and then face judgment. So it doesn't seem to leave a lot of wiggle room, right? In terms of when we die, that we get to hang around in limbo and finish projects that we didn't finish on weekends. That doesn't seem to be there. Although you could read into this going, it doesn't say how soon. Doesn't say how soon we move on to face judgment. And then I want to pull a story that Jesus told into the mix. I call it a story because sometimes people think of it as a parable. A parable is like an analogy that Jesus told. It comes from that word, or it's similar in that word to parallel, right? So parable, so Jesus uses an illustration alongside our lives that we can draw connections to. We go, oh, that's just like this. This is just like that. He goes, right. Now can you see how you're seeing it wrong, or how you need to fix how you're looking at it? This is not a parable. And the reason it's not a parable is that Jesus never gets too very specific in a parable. In a parable, again, it's just an analogy. It's like some guy walking down the road, right? Like that's the kind of the way he talks. This one, he uses a name. A name in particular, and there's details that don't appear in parables. So this is more like Jesus telling a story that represents a spiritual truth than it is about drawing some kind of abstract analogy, like with a parable. So this is how he sets it up. He says, there was a rich man, so that seems general. He was dressed in purple and fine linen and lived in luxury every day. And at his gate was laid a beggar named Lazarus, covered with sores and longing to eat what fell from the rich man's table. He was laid at the gate. He was put there. So he's not doing very well. He's got sores from not being mobile. He's depending on the rich people coming in and out of the gate to give him the food that he needs. Even the dogs came and licked his sores. That's how immobile he was. So here's how it plays out. The time came when the beggar died, and the angels carried him to Abraham's side. Now, let me just pause there. If you're not sure what Abraham's side is, Abraham in the Old Testament, in the Scriptures, is like the poster boy for being friends with God. He's called the friend of God. So what this passage, what Jesus is saying is, when the poor man died, what happened pretty much immediately was an angel came and took his spirit and carried it to the place where God's friends go. That's the best translation I can give you. The rich man also died and was buried. And in Hades, where he was in torment, he looked up and saw Abraham far away with Lazarus by his side. So it's very clear from Scripture that yes, our spirit has a life of its own apart from the body. But when that happens, that's our death, physical death. When that happens, we go to where we're going to end up to face whatever we're going to face for eternity, whether that's in Hades or that's where the friends of God go. In other words, end up in heaven. So again, I don't want to be terribly judgmental here. I don't mean to burst any bubbles, but what we found about the devil is that he is a liar and he's the father of lies. So if you're sitting here this morning and you were drawing some hope in the fact that dear Uncle Frank was somehow with us still, I want you to know that I sympathize with you, but that's not how spiritual reality works. What happens is the devil wants you to believe things that are not true so that you draw hope from things that cannot satisfy. This is his strategy in your life. This is his strategy in my life. And it's much more painful, in a sense, now that you've been deceived, to come to grips with the fact that we have an eternal destiny after the grave, but it's not a limbo kind of situation. It's not a holding tank where we got to kind of sit around or resolve issues that we couldn't fix while we were here so that we'll be prepared to move on to the next place. When you're done, you're done. So it's really important that we get what's going on. So here's the thing. What we really need to wrestle with is not, what do you believe about ghosts? In fact, what if I told you the real issue isn't whether you believe in ghosts, it's whether you're living like one? That's what I really want to talk about today. Because the monsters in our culture, and in any culture, are archetypes that represent struggles that we face as human beings. They're archetypes for the dark side of human nature that we wrestle with and we want to put a name to. So, for example, the werewolf represents the beast within, that part of me that maybe I can't control, that comes bubbling out every once in a while, and I can't believe where it came from. And then as quickly as possible, I try to stuff it back in until the next time I explode. The vampire is an archetype for the kind of person that doesn't feel alive unless they're drawing life from someone else. So there's codependency wrapped up in this, but these are people that you in darker moments or with your spouse or with a friend, you'd call them a leech. That's another name for this. And a ghost is kind of an archetype. Just think about what we believe about ghosts. Ghosts are disembodied spirits that are stuck in limbo because they can't move on because of unresolved issues. That's what a ghost represents. So the real question isn't, again, do you believe in ghosts? It's, are you living like one? Are you living like a disembodied spirit, stuck in limbo? You can't move on because of unresolved issues. That's what I want to talk about today. I hope that isn't what defines you. Because, see, a ghost feels disconnected from the world around it. A ghost feels unable to affect change in the world around it. Feels alone and alienated and stuck, like we're going around in circles and there's nothing we can do to fix it. I hope that's not how you feel, but if you do, I want to give you some hope this morning. I don't know how many of you have seen the movie The Sixth Sense. If Tom were here, one of our regular welcomers, he would tell you the date that it came out, and I don't remember how, but it's about 20 years old. I'm about to spoil it for you. You've had 20 years to watch the movie, so I'm not responsible for the spoiler alert that I'm about to give you. So the premise of the movie is that there's a psychologist named Malcolm who's visiting a little boy named Cole. And Cole's having serious issues. His mother doesn't know how to deal with the issues that he's facing. He's really turned inside out emotionally. And Cole is struggling with something in particular, which becomes the hallmark quote for the movie. So Malcolm asks him what's going on, this psychologist, and finally little Cole figures that he can trust this psychologist. And he utters these famous words, "I see dead people." And Malcolm asks him, "In your dreams?" "Not in my dreams." "While you're awake?" "Yes." "Dead people, like in graves, in coffins?" Cole says, "Walking around like regular people. They don't see each other. They only see what they want to see. They don't know they're dead." Malcolm Crowe asks, "How often do you see them?" "All the time. They're everywhere." Everywhere. So here's the deal today. You'd best start believing in ghost stories, Miss Swan. You're in one, to quote Pirates of the Caribbean. Right? I worked like 20 minutes on that graphic. Thank you for giving me that. That's just token. For those of you who don't know, a mic drop is okay, never mind. Okay. So the question is, can you relate? Can you relate? I'm going to use a term now. Are you ghosting in an area of your life? Are you ghosting in general in your life? Kind of in limbo while the physical world seems to move on. It feels like you're getting left behind, like everyone else is moving on, but you seem pinned, you seem stuck, you seem tethered to something you can't quite get a hold on, and it's inside of you, and yet you can't seem to let go. You find yourself more and more disconnected, maybe from people around you who don't understand what you're going through, and they're telling you just need to move on. It's time to grow up. It's time to turn the page. It's time. And you're like, I don't know how. I don't know how. Most unresolved issues that I face as a pastor when I'm helping people and in my own life are forgiveness issues. Most of them. Not all of them, but most of them. Most issues related to being unresolved and being stuck and not being able to move on are regrets or their anger. Regrets are about forgiving myself. Anger is about forgiving someone else, whether it's God, myself, and not that God actually does things that need to be forgiven, but sometimes it feels like he does. Now here's the punchline for the sixth sense. Like Cole said, the ghosts, they don't know that they're ghosts. They don't know that they're dead. They don't realize they're ghosting. They think they're just trying to figure their issues out. And by the end of the movie, you realize that the psychologist, Malcolm, is one of the ghosts that's come to visit Cole. He's one of the people that doesn't realize they're dead. See, when I talk to people about ghosting, I don't use these words, but when I talk to people about ghosting, I think you're hindered by this regret in your life, or I feel like you're still struggling with anger. People don't like to be labeled with anger. It's like, especially in our culture, it's one of those faux sin. Like you just don't want to be an angry person. And so over and over and over again, I hear people say, "Oh, I dealt with that." No, I get it. That's something that happened in my life. I dealt with it. I actually, no. Like I've been to counseling. And like it was like 7 or 8 months of this, or I went a few times, and it felt like it was good to get it off my chest, or time will heal, or just there's all kinds of different ways that we can talk about it. But at the end of the day, the test for whether you're ghosting isn't whether you went to a counselor or got prayer for something. It's, is your heart free? Not whether it ought to be free, is it free? How do you know if you're ghosting then? How do you know if your heart's free? Like sitting here this morning, maybe there's something on your mind, and you're going, I wonder if I'm really free of that. It's weird. I haven't thought of that in a long time, and boop, there it is. Now it's coming up in church. That could be God. Could be God talking to you. It's how God works. Or there's something you know deep down that you struggle with, but you're pretty good at shoving it away. And so you figure, no, it's not holding me back. Here's how, I'm going to give you four things that you can use to check. It's like a mirror, okay? A mirror that I'm going to hold up to you. And I want you to honestly, before God, just like you look at yourself in the mirror in the morning and you take an honest look at who's in the mirror, I want you to take a look right now and ask yourself, am I ghosting in an area of my life? So how do you know if you're ghosting? Number one, you're revisiting or stuffing painful memories. By revisiting, I mean rehashing, right? So normally what happens, even if it's something's painful, if it's truly healed, if it's truly dealt with, you're free to be in the present moment without constantly thinking about that thing. And if you find yourself continually going back to the same moments and reliving those and trying to find leverage on them, or resisting, going, no, I'm not going to think about that, I'm not going to think about that, forget that, I'm not thinking about that, it means it's not dealt with. It means you're ghosting. So the beautiful thing is, when that's dealt with, it won't pull you like that. Okay, so there's the first one. Number two. Or is that number one? Oh, sorry, that's number one. Number two, do you feel powerless to make changes now in your life? Like that thing that happened to you, that crippled you, that maimed you, that labeled you, that became your identity, do you feel like you're in a position now where it affected you to the point where, yeah, that was different. Like I was different after that, and now I don't feel equipped to face what I'm facing today. If you feel powerless, it's like the ghost in the movies that's trying to move the coffee cup and can't quite grab the coffee cup. Do you feel like that in your life? That like your problem is like a coffee cup. You can't get a handle on your problem. You're ghosting. It's not a judgment. It's a diagnosis. It's different. Okay? Third one. Do you expect others to fix your problems so you can move on? Are you so dependent on that counselor? Or are you dependent on your mom or your dad or a friend or the person that's supposed to be there for you? And if they were just there for you, if they've just come through for you, you'd finally be able to move on. And so the last one is kind of related. You find yourself blaming others for your own lack of progress. It's them. It's my boss, or it's my dad, or it's my upbringing, or it's that thing that happened to me when I was a kid. And you're constantly going back and you're rehashing this thing, and then you can't quite get a handle on it, and so you project it onto others, just like in The Sixth Sense. What you find out is Cole is being called upon by these ghosts to fix their problem, to help them find resolution so that they can be free from limbo and move on. This is what ghosts do. So are you ghosting? Are you blaming others for your own struggles? It would be tempting to go, well, if I'm ghosting, that's between me and God, or it's none of your business. Except haunted people haunt people. And you know this is true when you look at someone else. You know somebody in your life that is ghosting. Maybe that's the other thing your mind has been doing. You've been saying, oh man, I wish my friend needs to hear this, right? And because they expect me to fix their problem, or it feels like they're constantly disappointed in others and blaming others. They're never taking responsibility. They're always talking about how they can't get a handle on their problem, or they're not aware of any of this, but they're constantly bringing up that memory, like it's coming up over and over and over and over again. What's happening? You're being haunted by this person's haunting. They're not free, and it's rippling out and it's affecting you. So if you're not free, it's affecting the people around you. They may have found ways around it. They'll probably find ways of regaining equilibrium in your family. So you've got this dysfunction, and we'll kind of figure out how to create some sort of balance. So if I lean way this way, I can compensate for the fact that you're whacked out this way. We have some sort of balance as a family. But don't you think God would want you both to be able to stand up without falling over? So haunted people haunt people. If only there were someone who knew how to help. If only there were like someone who's been there, someone who's walked in the shoes that you walk in, but has come out the other side. If only there were someone who knew how to put the past to bed, or better yet, to put that to death. Rest in peace so that I can move on with a new life. If only there was someone who could take the powers of death and hell itself and put them to rest. Rest in peace so that I could be raised to new life. If only there were someone who had lived that himself, been put to death and raised to new life, so that I could be identified with him and go, I don't know how to do this, but I'm in him. If only. If only. Paul, one of the writers of the New Testament, in fact, wrote a good chunk of the New Testament, most of the New Testament, met that guy. Of course, his name is Jesus. I'll just say it, just in case you're like, oh, I was thinking, where is he? I want to meet this guy. You can meet him. Paul met him. After his death and resurrection, he met him, in fact. So it's no different for you and I. We can meet him too. And Paul was so radically transformed by this Messiah, Jesus, who can put things to death and raise things to new life with such power. He was so transformed that he had something to say. I'm going to read in a minute. Now, Paul was like this scholar. He was this theologian, this philosopher. He was classically trained in Judaism. He knew the law backwards and forwards. But he was also an idiot and a bit of a psychopath. So he was so zealous, be like Fred. He was like the Fred Phelps, like Westboro Baptist Church, going after the things of hardcore. He was that guy in the Judaism of the day, so that when Christianity emerged as a religion, he was leading the charge, going house to house, grabbing these Christians, breaking up families, throwing them in jail, having them flogged, having people killed. He was a murderer who met Jesus and was somehow able to walk through the rest of his life without ghosting. So if Paul, living that life, can walk out of a dead end and then experience freedom like maybe you and I have never tasted, I think it's possible for you and I. This is what Paul said. He said, I press on to take hold of that for which Christ Jesus took hold of me. Brothers and sisters, I don't consider myself yet to have taken hold of it. I'm just getting started. I've got the very edge of this thing, and it's already enough, but I want more. He says, one thing I do, forgetting what is behind and straining towards what's ahead, I press on toward the goal to win the prize for which God has called me heavenward in Christ Jesus. This is a man who's not ghosting. He's free. But I wonder if there's a word in this text that bothers you and should without explaining it. Maybe it's this word, forget. We're living in a moment where we're watching Hollywood implode because of all the hidden secrets and the things that were done behind closed doors. If you've ever heard the term casting couch, that's what we're talking about. This was such a regular part of that culture. They had a name for it, that you had to sleep your way to the top. And now it's coming to light. How do you think some of those people would read this? Why don't we just forget? Why don't we just forget the past? Why don't we just move on? Wouldn't Harvey Weinstein love us all to just forget? How would Paul's victims have felt about Paul saying, you know what, let's just let bygones be bygones. Let's not get all upset about who killed who. Is that what he's talking about here? Are we talking about living in denial of what's happened? That's not okay. This word forget, you don't get this in English very well. But in the original language, it meant that something would literally drop out of your mind. Not haunt you, and you constantly let's keep batting it away as though it never happened. Paul is talking about the fact that he's met this Jesus who took his sin and paid for it, satisfied the justice component of it, and set him free so powerfully that all the things he's done, accomplished both for good and evil, it's like they're dropping out of his mind, and they are no longer his baseline. He doesn't have to keep fighting the thought. He's free of the thought. It's gone. It's wiped away. This isn't about not being accountable for what we've done. In today's day and age, if Paul became a believer, he might have done some jail time after. And that would have been okay. But he's free on the inside. And when we're free of our past, we're free to pursue our purpose. That's what he's saying. He's saying, I'm completely free. That stuff does not haunt me anymore. I've given up the ghost. I've died to that. And now I'm free. I'm free to pursue this call heavenward. And I get to go up and up and up and up and up. And it's never going to stop because guess where Christ is seated again? At the right hand of God. And I'm on my way because my spirit's already there. So you can't kill me. You can't dissuade me. You can't hold me back. I'm not blaming anyone for anyone. My lack of progress, it's me and Jesus, baby. And right, he's going on. I'm going for it. How would you like to live with that kind of freedom? How would you like to do it? It begins by asking yourself these questions. Stop kidding yourself. Stop saying, no, I dealt with that. Been to counseling for that, got prayer for that. I don't care about any of that. What I care about is, are you free? That's the question. And if any of these ring a bell, there's an aspect of your life that is not free, and that is not judgment. That is a diagnosis, and there's a prescription. His name is Jesus, and you can meet him on the road just like Paul did, and you can say, I'm free, and that's slipped out of it's dropped out of my mind, and I'm now free to pursue the future that God has for me. That's what he wants for you, and that's what I want for you. Now, if you really want to go deep on this, take a screenshot. Go ahead and do it. Take a screenshot, show it to someone you love. Go home after church today and say, honey, am I ghosting? Well. And then in the context of this message, let's give each other the grace that when we talk about this, we're not judging each other, but we could say, well, there is that one thing you continually bring up. Like I don't mean to judge, I'm just saying, it seems like you're not free to me. Could be wrong. And have the grace to say, you're right, I do that. Help other people and let other people help you. Hold up the mirror, because why would you live in denial, ghosting your way through life, unable to fix things, feeling more and more disconnected from other areas in your life? You watch, when Jesus heals something, it reconnects you to the source of life in that area, and color comes into a black and white picture, and you start to live again in that area. It's beautiful. What if we just took the whole box and dumped it over and gave it to Jesus? What if it's time to give up the ghost, guys? What if it's time to just go, forget the pretending. I want this to rest in peace. I want it to be done with. I'm not going to just pretend. I'm not going to try and leave it in the past anymore, because it keeps coming into my present, and I'm haunting people that I love because I'm haunted. Now, if you need help with that, I know that I've just kind of laid it out. It starts with Jesus. But if you need help with that, we can get started. I can help. There are other people probably in this room that can help you with that. I'll be over there right after the service, like I always am. But it's time to start dealing with it. It's time to start praying about it and watch what God does in your life. Let's pray.